Hi, good morning, good morning, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the conversation on celibacy, masturbation, and porn. I am your host, Yeida Ford, and I have my great panel joining me for this conversation. So, a couple of things before we get started. Why am I doing this conversation? Maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was talking to my nephew's dad, and was celebrating his 18-month anniversary being sober. And he's overcome a methamphetamine addiction, which is, meth is a very addictive drug, right? And so people always say, like, meth, that's the hardest one to overcome. People can overcome that. And so as I was talking to him, though, he was kind of like lackluster in his celebration of the 18-month anniversary. So I'm just like, why do you sound kind of down, And he's like, well, it hasn't really been like the last however many months haven't really been great for me. And I asked him, because this is my nephew's dad, right? I'm like, have you relapsed? And he was like, no, I haven't relapsed, but I have put myself in environments that are not conducive to my sobriety. And he started to explain that his brother opened up a bar. He started working for the bar, working 16-hour shifts or whatever, but wasn't really paying attention to his recovery from addiction. And he even mentioned his Facebook page and how he had started posting things that just reflected a mindset that he used to have when he was using. And so for him, he said, sooner or later, I think, and I asked him, I said, do you think you would have eventually relapsed? And he said, yeah, just from working in a bar, even though I was helping my family, I wasn't putting myself first. And he said, in recovery, you have to be first. Like sobriety has to be your main focus every day. And as I was thinking about that, I started to then think about, to be truthful, like the notion of sexual purity and celibacy and how many things in the environment contaminate what we're trying to do if that's a goal, right? And in our culture, just every day in America, different people may be celibate for different reasons. It's not always religious or whatever. People might be like, look, I'm cool. I'm just trying to cleanse myself, cleanse my soul. I'm just trying to be on pause, or I'm trying to do the semen retention thing. I've heard that a lot on social media about semen retention. I'm not trying to whatever. But I'm like, how do we accomplish that? How do you go about accomplishing that in a way that looks successful? Or how do you measure celibacy, right? And if you're married, for the married folk, if you've gone through divorce, you may experience a period where you've been celibate. Or if you're married, you may be celibate in marriage. And then what do you do? Very complex situation, but I think we know, at least I know I have met individuals who've been in that situation where they are married. There is not a sexual partnership or any sexual intimacy between the spouses. And then, stuff happens. Could be outside affair, but what if it's pornography? What if that person is, pleasuring themselves? Is that still cheating? Is that considered cheating? So we're going to explore different topics this morning. I'm going to introduce my panel, and then we're just going to hop right into it. I don't know how this appears on everybody else's screen, but to my immediate right is my good friend Helen Fasihaye. She is a part of a small group that I started a couple of years ago. We're on a journey together, just talking about issues that pertain to where we're at as business owners, single women, also women preparing for marriage, et cetera. So Helen and I have been talking about these issues for a minute. And I asked her to join to this with, some insight with where she's at. And then my friend Joan Lindo, who's also in the same small group. I know Joan, though, for a very, very long time. We go way back. And actually, Joan, Helen, and I are actually reading Derek Prince's book, God is a Matchmaker, and there is a chapter on celibacy. So we're exploring that chapter. We'll probably ask or pose some questions or raise some points from Derek Prince's book as well today. Then also Raven White. She is the former director of the Wildwood Lifestyle Center in Wildwood, Georgia. She is also a certified coach, lifestyle coach, and she specifically deals with mental health and sexual trauma. So Raven is going to speak, got a lot of wisdom, a lot of insight, particularly on the pornography masturbation piece. So thank you, Raven, for joining us this morning. And then Mr. Robert Eugene Young, who I actually met through Raven, who also has a lot of insight and wisdom to share on the sexual trauma piece as well. So I think this is going to be a very insightful conversation. And so I'm very, very excited to hop right in. So here's my first question, you guys. So I'm going to say in the West, right? In the West, focusing on the United States. Pornography is very, very popular. But yet it's also stigmatized at the same time, I think. And this is just me talking. And let me just say, as we get into the conversation, you guys, you're going to hear opinions. So I want people, let's not conflate opinions with facts, because facts are different from opinions, right? And then there's also truth. So we're going to be sharing some opinions, but there's also going to be some data and facts that are shared as well, so that we know exactly the parameters about what we're talking about. So when I say porn is stigmatized, I'm gonna say it seems stigmatized. That's part of my opinion. Given the popularity of porn, do we feel that there is a stigma, I guess, on pornography, to the point where we don't talk about it openly in our culture?
I mean, I'll say this. Whatever was a shameful thing in the past has drastically changed now. And I think there's a pendulum still, but overall, I think that there's a more of a negativity to it to me still when it comes more towards women than men, only because it's almost become an expectation for men. We allow men to be angry and competitive and sex driven, but we don't allow them to show fear and be afraid. So it's almost come to the point we have expected it. The thing that we don't allow or expect or at least want is when they're in marriage or in a committed relationship. I think that we don't, you know, we don't think that it's something where if they already have a person to have sex with, why would they still want the visual? And people don't really understand what the mind goes through that requires the visual, as well as probably even having someone. But our society today has changed so drastically that to me, it doesn't seem like a stigma anymore. It doesn't seem bad anymore unless you're highly religious. And even then, there's some kind of leeway depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
just
go ahead, Helen. I was going to say the moral relativism conversation is, I can feel that coming on. Go ahead.
right. I mean, I want to add to what Raven was saying. When I think about like it being a stigma today, I think about like what was it yesterday, right? So for the older days, it wasn't necessarily that it was porn film wise. It was that, men had these pictures of women under their beds, right? Little boys had them. It's kind of like we know this, and like you said, it's more like okayed for men, almost expected, not just for men, but for even little boys, right? To like find their dad's like secret stash and start off. But we don't, like you said, we don't really realize what it does to the brain, right? What it triggers in the mind, in the heart, in the flesh, and everything else. And I think it's just evolved over time with as technology has evolved. And now it's like it went from film, and even I just remember when I was growing up in the US, like porn was not something you saw on TV. Like it was, PG, TV was like kissing was the most you got. Now it's on every show. Like they basically give you porn every day. So I think as we've evolved over time, not only has it not been stigmatized, it's almost like been put into your face, whether you'd like to see it or don't like to see it, right? So I think we've taken away the stigma, at least for men. I think for women, it's more like hush hush. Like if women do it, it's like you do it in your privacy. You don't talk about it or you don't really mention it. That's probably why there's not as huge of a conversation about porn addiction in women, right? You hear it about men. And it's almost like a cop out sometimes. Sometimes, like I think society has like created this like pathway to like if someone has an issue, they'll be like, oh, it was not to say that it's not, because I think medically it is an addiction. But I think we have created a society where we have put all of this on men and we have okayed it in some ways. And we've also like pushed it, right? Like we've kind of put it in everybody's face. So I think it's evolved for sure.
The evolution of porn, this is my opinion, but this is what I believe. It has become a sex alternative. Because when you talk about porn, you must include masturbation and you must include sex toys. So, yeah, it has evolved for sure. It's in our face. But it looks more to me as a sex alternative where people who participate in porn and masturbation and sex toys may resort to that versus dealing with an actual human being. And who knows what they use to justify it. One of the things that I think that they use to justify it, they don't have to worry, they can do it whenever they want. They don't have to worry about a relationship, which is very selfish, and they don't have to worry about STDs. But my main point at this point is that I believe it has become a sex alternative for both men and women.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And to Helen's point too, depending on how old you are, if you're in your 30s or 40s, then you do remember porn like being the magazines in dad's underwear drawer underneath the mattress or the Playboy channel. Anybody remember the Playboy channel? That was kind of like a special channel. You might be on your parents' TV or whatever. And this was when we had box TVs, but and a cable box. Right. So there was the Playboy channel, but there was definitely, it was something that was supposed to be hidden, kind of the elephant in the room if that was in your household. And I first, just to throw out something personal about myself, I did grow up in a household where there was porn and there were magazines hidden. There may have been a Playboy channel, but I also remember seeing videos with that were different from other videos, like they were in a black case and not in the clear case when you used to rent the VHS from 3-day video or whatever. So yeah, it was definitely a thing, so generationally, I think porn has evolved, access to porn has evolved.
I think, but I want to say something else really quickly.
Sure.
When he said evolved, I think we also have to realize it is no longer the pretty girl in the magazine or, oh, I should see a sexual act. It has gotten violent. People are literally paying married couples. There are young married couples that are literally paying their way through school. They did news reports on this. It's gotten where they're wanting the man to hit and grab and beat his wife. They're using little girls. It has changed from just, we like sex to this dominance. So it's a whole nother world and just self-pleasure, right?
Yeah.
And getting dopamine and some serotonin, because of course it's like happy hormones happening. Now it's like, I have to see you hurt and abused and raped and beat down. It's bad enough that they made a video game, about raping women, and it made it a video game. Okay. That now and the reason why I say there's no more stigma even so much is that, if you look at our television today, I think the young girl said it on one of your other panelists, they're using teenagers now to do the sexual acts on television instead of 30-year-olds playing teenagers. Things have changed drastically in the past 10 to 15 years. So, porn is like, when you say porn now, I'm not thinking about, the guy that just want to see a girl, do some kind of sexual act. You're seeing men who are looking for abuse and abuse of children, women, men, doesn't matter. It's just that's a whole nother level. I just want to put that one out there too.
Well, yeah, that's gradations of porn, right? Which I think that is a different aspect of the conversation. But as I understand it, the neurochemistry of the brain, when there's an excess of dopamine or serotonin, then the brain wants more, so that it can actually hit another high. Which is why I heard a very strong comment made yesterday by a therapist. He said porn addicts are drug addicts. Whatever that high is, whatever it took that first time, it may take something more to get them there than next time. And I think that's how we get to gradations of it. So that's more into an addiction conversation than this particular conversation now. But I do want to read off a comment that I saw yesterday. There's a YouTube video called "Can We Talk About the Porndemic?" It's on Lisa Turkhurst's YouTube channel. And one of the things that the woman said, and actually, I want to pose one question before I ask this question. If Rob said porn is a sex alternative, right? Or masturbation, sex alternative. If I'm doing this, I don't have to be engaged with somebody else. I want to find out, and this is my question to the panel, are you still celibate? If you are watching porn and engaging in self-pleasure, are you still celibate? And I see a question in the chat. I'm going to get to that. Are you still celibate? And
in technicality,
please put your questions in the chat, and then we're going to get to them. So thank you for your questions.
I say based on definition, technically yes, because celibacy just saying you're not literally doing actual penetration intercourse. So technically yes, but purity of mind, that's a whole nother why there would be a question to such a thing. But technically, if I am not, because even in definition, they say people can expand it out to holding hands and kissing and things like that, depending on, but the actual definition is actual penetration. So if a person's not doing that, technically they're not. But that's just
any other perspectives? I'm saying technically, air quotes. Any other perspectives? Are you still celibate? Are you celibate? If you're engaging in pornography and masturbation, are you still celibate? Anybody else?
I would say you're not celibate because it's not just physical; it's mental. Mm-hmm. You're allowing yourself to get to that point. You're not touching another person, but you're still getting that end result. If your end result is to climax, you climaxed, however you did it. So though not technically, but you're doing something. You're not just sitting there doing it. So that's my take.
I mean, I agree with both, right? Because I think technically, yes, you are because you're not with someone else physically. Mm-hmm. But I think emotionally, spiritually, and in every other way, you technically are, right? Like you're not imagining thin air either, right? Porn gives you another body, another human to look at, to desire, to lust after, to even probably like imagine. So I think from that perspective, it's a technically yes, but no.
Yeah, I agree with her.
Question from Patricia Stamper. What about the OnlyFans addiction? Very good question. Is that considered
the new porn?
But yep.
Yeah.
I heard a therapist call it sexually stimulating material, SSM, right? That is easily accessible, OnlyFans, sexually stimulating material.
Wow.
And I heard this. Sometimes OnlyFans and things like this in social media create an arousal template. That's an arousal template. These are just terms that I've just heard yesterday from a therapist, that once you kind of start looking at something and you like it, that may be the thing that you need now to be aroused or to get up. And I want us to kind of venture down that road of, what is the impact? If we're saying, look, porn, masturbating, that's an alternative, for me while I'm trying to maintain celibacy. The question is, what is the cost, right? What's going to be the impact? Am I paying a price there, right? Am I paying a price? So I want us to start thinking about that as we get down with some of the questions. But here's a question, comment actually, that I wanted to share with you all. I want to get some reactions to this. The comment was posted in a YouTube video that I watched called "Can We Talk About the Porndemic?" It was Lisa Turkhurst, a therapist and oddly enough, a theologian, all talking about pornography and sex and marriage. And one of the things that one of the comments was, 10 years of dealing with my husband's lies. She said, porn destroyed my marriage. 10 years of dealing with my husband's lies and preferring porn queens over me. Preferring porn queens over me. We talk about impact on a marriage. So when we talk about celibacy and hey, I'm still celibate. If you believe, okay, this is an opinion now. If you actually believe if it's your opinion that you're still celibate, even though you're engaging in it, what happens when you enter into your marriage with somebody, right? And maybe your engagement, whatever. And now you've got this arousal template. right? Because the things that have happened in your brain are the things that all the data says. Now we're talking about facts. Data says dopamine is released, serotonin is released, your neurotransmitters are going off. And so this is a high for whoever is engaging in it. What happens when you get into your relationship, your marriage, and now you got an arousal template and your spouse does not match that? What happens then? For those of you who believe that, hey, you know, I've been celibate, and you've been telling them that. Say you've been telling them that. No, I'm celibate.
Mm.
And you might have said, well, I still watch a little bit, you know, a little something, you know, on the side, but I'm keeping myself, you know, I'm keeping myself free from sexual sin with another person. Or I'm keeping myself free from, like, I haven't been with anybody in 2 or 3 years. You know how the things that we say, I haven't been with anybody, I haven't been with anybody, I haven't been with anybody. But you've been engaging in porn and then you get into the relationship. What's the impact then?
So I'm trying to figure out, when you think about it from a theological or biblical aspect, it's by thought, word, or deed. So even if you're not engaging physically, you still, I mean, how can you avoid it? You know, people are stimulated by what they see. They're stimulated by things that they hear. Now, you don't have to act upon it, but it's still part of, I think it's just our human nature, you know, because we're created to love. You know, it's just who we are. Now, I think where we get lost in, where we get lost in translation is allowing it to control us, you know, but I still don't think it's bad. Like if that's how you feel, you know, to have those feelings, you know what I mean? Like, 'cause I just think there's so many levels to this situation, you know. Like I said, it's all about your mind control over it. Because if you're, you know, people do these things for different reasons, you know. Some is just about pleasure. But I just think that we were created in love and to be loved.
Yeah. So you guys, this is Deandra Brown, who just hijacked into our panel. You're supposed to be muted, actually. So let me give you the rules, y'all, if you just joined. If you are not on the panel list, please mute yourself entering into the conversation. Post your questions in the chat. Thank you. But Dee, that was a good point. And that's what we're talking about. You know, that's why we're having this conversation. So yeah, let's go there. How does the celibacy conversation change once you're in a relationship now and you've been watching that? Now you're with somebody and you don't feel, you know, you're now seeing the impact of that. Like, do you tell the person, let me ask a different question. Do you tell the person if they ask you the last time you had sex, do you tell them, hey, it's 2 to 3 years ago, even though you know you've been engaging in porn and masturbation? Or do you divulge that you've been watching porn?
I think this is my opinion, and this is a conversation I've had just with other girlfriends. So I don't know that people actually connect the dots, right? Like, I don't think people say, if someone, like, you know, if you're with a new partner or whatever, and there's that conversation about when you were last intimate with someone, I don't think someone says, I think they think about the body, right? Like, the last time I engaged with the body of X is 3 years ago, you know, however, I don't think they think the last time I engaged in porn or masturbation, because I think it goes back to that question. I think it goes back to that question of, you know, is porn, you know, sex, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, a part of sex. So I think people typically don't divulge that. I mean, I don't think they even consider that in their response first. And I don't think anyone actually thinks to ask that either. I've never known anybody to say, when was the last time you engaged in sex? I'm sorry, not sex, but porn. I've never heard a man ask that. Or a woman.
I think men are happy,
you know?
when women do.
Right. And I think women are not as happy when men do. Right.
We're not as happy.
So exactly. So I don't know that the two are always naturally put together, honestly.
Sure.
I think people separate them. So therefore it leads to their response saying yes or no only from the sexual perspective.
Yeah, so I want to ask this, and I see a comment in the from Patricia Stamper. I think this was in response to what Deandra was saying. She said, "I believe your love map is forever altered."
Mm-hmm.
And she's also saying porn sets an ill-advised expectation of what sex, organs, or climaxing is because it's staged. And so I want to ask this question: what impact, if any, and this is again all opinion, um, and we're separating opinion from facts here. I mean, we have the science behind porn, right? And we'll intertwine that in the conversation. Then you guys, I'm not a scientific expert on it. I just did some, research, listening to some other data on what pornography does to the brain. But what impact, and this is your opinion, does porn have on a committed romantic relationship?
So it still is tied to even the first one, because I was waiting to hear what others would say. But one of the things that I do know, and I just even learned that the number's higher yesterday. I've always said that 80% of your day is run by your subconscious. Found out there's really 95%. So it's 5% is kind of what you're only thinking about right now as you're talking or listening to us, But things that happen before the age of 18, your world just builds on that, right? So if a person has been engaging in self-pleasure, it's all about me. However you want to look at it, it's all about me as a character, as a defining fact of how I function. Even though I may try to make a change, it's a decided effort to make that change, right? It's a decided effort to decide that this is no longer going to be my happy space. I'm going to now try to put someone else in that happy space and let them become first instead of me becoming first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just across the board, that is hard to do for ourselves if you just say, I want to lose weight, right? It's hard to kind of keep such a consistency. And they say it takes 21 days to break a habit. It takes 63 days, 63, right? Just to make a new habit, first nature in that 95%. So unless you're consistently saying, no, 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 it doesn't really change, right? Because the human brain was designed to make these habits self-protective for you. So you don't have to think about you walking and breathing and pooping and whatever. And until we understand how the mechanism of the brain and body works, we can rationalize all day long how we feel and what we think. It's stuck on, you trained me to do this. Because you've trained me to do this, this is what I'm going to do. And until you tell me to stop on a consistent basis so I can have a neural pathway that's somewhere different, we're staying here. And if you choose to go back, like you took a vacation, it's like a broken bone. I'm coming back with vengeance because you said, oh, we just took a vacation, but this is where I really want to be, right? So it's difficult. So when you get into a marriage, as much as I love you, baby, but it is all about me. And the erection for a man. Yeah, I love you too. But we take time. This thing that porn does for relationships is, I have to admit, as much as I am into Christ, I still, and I haven't had sex since for over 15 years now. When I still made out with guys and did things, some things that they would do with me, it was just like, why are you doing that? And it was like, well, it worked before. I said, nah, y'all watch porn. it ain't work for no chick. And if it did, she lied to you. Because that is not how we're designed. You don't just touch me and all of a sudden I go, ah! That is not what's going to happen, right? But they get things quick and we don't. And there's in the brain, and especially for women, we're expecting a certain aspect that is not really designed for men to do. That's not how they are. We mess up reality in our minds. I'm talking too much, so I'm gonna shut up soon. But
no, keep on.
We mess up reality, right? And we have false expectations from people, men and women, when we start engaging in our own self-pleasure, in our own memories and our own thought patterns. And when they don't fit into that, The hell and damnation that knocks on our door is horrible, especially in marriage.
Mm.
And I'm just dealing with this right now with a group that just left, because he's like, you gotta have sex with me. And she's like, but I'm in pain and I can't do this. And you want it too much. And I feel like I'm a porn. She literally said that last week. I feel like I'm a porn sign of my own marriage and you don't love me. Right. And he ain't doing that. His whole identity is now stuck on I need to have sex. So there's a lot that filters in what happens, that we don't talk about. We just assume that I'm just getting a lot of pleasure until I can be able to have sex with somebody. But you don't know what you're doing. You set up a template that is hell to break, not impossible, but it's
not
almost like
impossible.
now telling the human brain to stop this dopamine to go to something where it's like, because you created a world. So I'm gonna stop talking. That's somebody else still in.
Well, no, for those of you who joined when you didn't hear the introduction, Raven White is a lifestyle coach, and she's the former lifestyle director for Wildwood Lifestyle Center. And when she's talking about groups, these are people who come to Wildwood to get help getting free from addictions, sicknesses, diabetes, whatever. Wildwood specializes in that using holistic means and therapeutic means. And she's also a certified counselor and a specialist in mental health. So what she's talking about it was pretty important. I want to proffer this too. I got into this conversation where her husband, they're still married, but they are now going through a divorce. One of the things that she would see is him. This is the arousal template conversation, you guys. The term arousal template is a thing in our culture now. Her husband would have pictures and post pictures of women who were redheads. She's a redhead, right? But he would post pictures of very skinny redheads in the shower, right? He would put the pictures up in the shower. And, I presumably, that was his happy place. So he would put the pictures of these women. And I don't know if they were naked pictures. We didn't really get into that. I was just really shocked when she told me this. He would post the pictures of the women in the shower with him as he showered. And presumably that's where, he was masturbating or whatever off of those images, right? And I was really floored to hear that. And so to hear this woman saying, look, I'm she was talking with a lot of venom. And I'm like, wait, okay, have you gotten to the place where you could forgive? And, sometimes she would, but then when she would think about these memories, like I remember pictures of these other women in the shower. What does that do to a woman in a marriage? I mean, do you feel compared? I mean, yeah, right. I'm not enough. That's saying to a woman, I'm not enough. And that's kind of what she was saying. That. So Raven, what you were saying is on point because that's exactly the conversation that I had with her. And I've heard several women and just read comments in different posts where women have said, look, this thing just messed up my marriage. And it's just so devastating, right? Any other comments? I'll take one more comment from the panel on that. And y'all, the comments in the chat, Raven, you have people going off in that chat, boy.
Right.
But
I'll take one more comment from Robert, and then we'll move on to the next question.
So with that being said, yes, it messes with your mind. I believe it's natural. You are vulnerable to the person that you're with, both male and female. One thing that Raven said, now we're talking about masturbation and pornography to stay on topic, expectations, not just from a female perspective, what I need to look like, what I need to do, the sounds I need to make, wink, wink, no sounds and stuff men want, but also from a female perspective, the sex toy industry. Whoa, them dilly-dos can get quite massive. So if that's your expectation and the guy that you actually meet doesn't hit that spot, I feel sorry for you. Like if you didn't have some type of moderation in your size choice or the little features that come along with them, you setting yourself up. But ultimately, what Raven said, it is possible to overcome. It's all things are possible to overcome. You just have to have the desire. And that's when we look at this topic and every other topic saying that we are already victorious. We just have to make up our minds to move forward. But in saying all that is to say those expectations, both male and female, can become quite distorted.
But can I just
Okay.
add one piece,
Yeah,
Raven,
this,
real quick?
but
I
make it
think it's
brief, please, because I
it
have
is going to be brief,
several
yeah.
other questions.
I also think about just like the boldness of it, right? So when you were giving the example of your coworker, yeah, you did. It's like, how bold is this man to post something like that in the shower that he shares with his wife? But it also goes back to what Raven was saying, the addiction in the brain and how the neurons work. It's almost like you have no control. He sounds like he has no control, or maybe he is doing it because he doesn't care. We don't know, but I just wanted to point that out because I think there's a level of boldness that it takes to just act out things, thoughts, whatever. It's almost like there's a control that you're not able to switch off really quickly to be
Yeah, but
considerate
and
of someone else.
that's the part of the addiction too, right? Like
Well,
Exactly.
men see it differently, though. I think we forget something. Women feel like you cheated when you emotionally look at another woman. Men feel like you cheated when you actually
Right.
had sex with another
Mhm.
man. That's two different. So they don't get offended by that. So they can't understand why we are.
so just so we're not conflating things, I don't know that that was necessarily Helen's point, but what Deandra,
Okay.
going back to something that Deandra said earlier, well, some people, they might just do it, a couple times and they're not really hooked to it. This goes back to a comment that I heard a therapist make. He says it's the difference between snorting 2 lines of cocaine, never being addicted. You got the high, but you weren't hooked. Then there's the person who hits freebase one time and they're gone, right? They're gone. I think depending on how your brain is or what it is that what it is you're taking on the first time, the addiction can come in like that, or you may have done, say you watched something and it didn't really do that much for you. Hey, that, it was all right. But the risk that you take is you watch something that hits that spot the right way. And then the next time you get the itch, you're like, well, maybe I'll go back and look at that again. And so I think that we walk a fine line with pornography and addiction. I think we just do, if we're just going to be honest about it, and understanding that the things that porn does to the brain is the same thing that the brain reacts the same way when we're using heroin, when we're using drugs. So I want to get now to the celibacy piece a little bit and pose a different question and get some other panelists to involve. Is there any benefit to being celibate? Is there any benefit? And I'm going to pose this to Joan Lindo because I don't think we've heard from Joan yet today. That's probably the one term, we do see that in the Bible. You don't see masturbation used in the Bible or porn used in the Bible, but we have seen, Paul, 1 Corinthians 7:7, right, talk about the gift of celibacy. It's a gift, meaning everybody can't, it's a gift, right? So Joan, is there any benefit? Is there any benefit to be?
I can think of at least two. One is just the wholeness. If I'm sleeping around, I feel like I'm leaving parts of my body with parts of my spirit, my being with all these different people. I'm like, when I'm celibate, I think I am whole. I am all accounted for. I'm here. I'm possessing my emotions and everything. There's something about the wholeness of it all for me personally, my own opinion. And the other thing, just the real practical, something Robert said earlier, you don't have to be worried about STDs and all this. You're like, okay, so the health ramifications. Otherwise, emotionally, spiritually, I'm just whole. So to me, and peace of mind, that's a benefit. So I don't know what for other people what the first benefit, but that's the first one for me. I feel whole.
Wow, that's a good one. That's a good one. Anybody else? Is there any benefit to being celibate?
I think of reputation. Me being a musician growing up, there's several things that I do, but growing up and hearing how they used to talk about men in certain aspects of life, and I made a conscious decision that I won't be the one. Out of the things that I do, I say I'm not going to be the one that they say that has been with all the women. I'm not going to be the one that they say you can't let them into your house and hear come on to you and things of that nature. And but yeah, so the word that came to mind was reputation is one of the benefits. And then with my nephews, as they got older, I said, you don't want to walk into a room and multiple women knows what your male part looks like. And that was my way of telling them, don't be going out there sleeping around with a bunch of women. But reputation.
Wow. Wow, that's a good one. I had to let that sit for a minute. Where everybody knows what your private parts look like. That's and being a woman dating a man who has a reputation. You walk into a room and 5 different women have been with him. And I know some women where they would literally go to events and they could count the number of women who have been with their boyfriend. They could count them. And I don't know how that would make me feel. I'm saying I don't know. Okay, next question. We're on the celibacy topic still. Are you celibate if you engage only in oral stimulation?
No,
I
it's still sex.
I think that's still penetration somehow.
If you get off, whatever you do to get off. Oh, look at this! You got phone sex. Remember back in the day, the little 800 numbers. You had them little women you could call.
Old school.
But this. Anyway, the answer is no. I believe is no, especially coming from a man and having been offered is no. Thank you.
So why the gray area? So when it was porn and masturbation, I was like, well, yeah. Shannon Devon. Shannon was like, Robert knows the Lord. But there was gray when it was like, well, masturbation, maybe you're still celibate, but with oral sex, no. Let me proffer another story. I was talking to my cousin, a male cousin, and I believe this was a young woman he dated, but she was a virgin, but she routinely engaged in oral sex. I mean, but she said she was a virgin, and I just remember my reaction to that, like, well, but oral sex was her thing, but she was a virgin, and I'm like, okay, are you okay? Are you still a virgin if you if you engage in oral sex?
People just hold on to exact definitions. Exact definitions are what they are. She still got her hymen. That's how people are justifying to help themselves. But if you start talking about purity, you start talking about modesty, self-respect, dignity, that's when you start getting into a better realm. But a lot of times for helping people to justify what they're doing, to feel comfortable that they're still virgins or celibate, yeah, they go by the exact definition, right? So it gives them that peace, which surpasses all understanding, that they're not doing anything wrong. Exactly.
Because,
but also, isn't it oral sex though? There's still the sex part of the word, so it's just
sex.
Yeah. And oral, the funny part is anal sex. If you look at the definition of, it's another word for anal sex, but
sodomy.
Sodomy. If you look at sodomy, the definition of sodomy is oral sex and anal sex.
And anal, yeah. By definition.
By definition. So they're virgins, but they're still, they're sodomite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm kind of liking Raven's explanation that's when you start justifying, when you start drawing these lines in the sand. Like, well, is this sex or is this not sex? I think you might be trying to justify some stuff.
Here's the danger. I think people are forgetting, and I didn't answer it in the last one, but I'll try to combine these. I think people forget men and women respond differently. That's why I kind of was trying to say, not to say I was disagreeing even with the disrespect and addiction of the man that had the pictures in the shower, but women and men respond vastly differently. And I think we need to understand that. So for a woman, we bond. You can literally hold us for 20 seconds and our hormones will start to gravitate and bond to the person who's holding us. When you have sex with me and your penis enters inside of me, my body starts to develop ways of not attacking your body and start to change towards the chemicals of the man that I'm having sex with. Very vastly different than what happens with a man, right? He gives his energy, he gives his stuff. So there's a lot that happens. So when a person is saying I'm celibate, but they are doing other acts, then the human brain is trying to figure out other things to really classify what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start putting things in your mouth or in other parts that wasn't designed for, that's where a lot of the shame and degradation start to come into your personality and character, because you wasn't designed to have things in those areas.
Yeah, Raven, I'm glad you brought it back to the celibacy piece, because that's where I'm going. There's a different question that I have about the impact on men and women, though, that I'm saving for as we get towards the end.
Okay.
Next question: are you still celibate if you and your girlfriend, boyfriend engage in foreplay with your clothes on?
This should just be a game
They call it dry
altogether.
humping.
Right.
Man, I felt that when you just said it, talking about it.
Stimulation.
Yeah, it's stimulation is stimulation. It's tough, you know, but I would say yes. Anything that you do that activates, the operative word is activate that aspect, because it just grows. But the answer is yes. You just have to be careful. You really do.
I'll be honest with you. Physiology is, you're going to fight it all day long. You know, neurology, you could try to fight it all day long. But the human brain, it thinks it's doing something.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. It just thinks it's already doing it. You know, you thought about it, you imagined it. So the only thing that didn't happen is the actual penetration. But you've given it every other play within the game. The human brain just really did assume we've already done it. So just know that psychologically you've already done it.
Yeah, it's the engagement in whatever form it comes.
Yeah, and the impact. So I'm going to go back to this question on impact on men and women, and then I'm going to hop back to this notion of celibacy and how, because in the comments I just saw, well, it's part of our nature. And then the question would be then, why try being celibate, and is it possible, and what are the things scientifically too that happen when we choose celibacy, and what are the things that if we are trying to do this thing because for whatever reason, doesn't even matter the reason, what are some of the things that we should do to stick to it's like sticking to your workout plan or sticking to your diet plan. What are some of the things we need to do if we're really trying to do this so we can achieve whatever our goal is that we're trying to achieve by being celibate, right? Whatever the motivation for it is. So I want to step back before we get to that question, because that's where we're going to close. What this impact on that pornography has on men and women. A comment that I heard yesterday, this was a therapist in the YouTube video I was telling you all about the porndemic. One of the things he said was 100% of the men that he has spoken with, like without exception, whether they're Christians or non-Christians, but without exception, said that they would be okay if their wives were watching porn. They're 100% cool with it. They're 100% like, word up, that there was without exception. And it kind of ties into what Raven's comment was. Well, men don't see it as cheating, right? They don't. But then when the therapist made that comment, he's like, hey, this is just 100% of men said, I'm cool with it. If she's watching it, that's great. That to them, they see it as an advantage to their sex life if she's watching it. But then the theologian guy, who was, again, interesting, a part of the panel, he said, well, but then it kind of goes back to selfish need. Because what if the porn that she likes is not the porn that you, the husband, like? What if she's into something that's completely different than what you like? Then how do you resolve that conflict? Because once again, if she's watching porn, he's watching porn, whatever, at the end of the day, you're still focused on your own needs. You're not really focused on the needs of your partner. And truly, and I think his point was, for the sex to be truly satisfying to both people and mutually satisfying and gratifying, there's got to be a focus on the other person and what they want. There's got to be a focus on the other person and their needs. But pornography inherently is just focused on you, because ain't nobody, you're not the screen, the people on the screen or the woman on the screen or the man on the screen, they don't know you. you're not emotionally connected to them. And Raven's point about the bond, well, that's oxytocin. Men have that too.
Mm-hmm.
And women have that too. The oxytocin is released. That's the bonding agent. With pornography, though, oxytocin is not there, right? It's just dopamine, serotonin, the neurotransmitters. Oxytocin is only there, when there is an actual bond with another human being. So he's not going to get that from porn. But if his brain is addicted to just the feeling of dopamine, serotonin, neurotransmitters, he's not really thinking about the oxytocin. So I was talking about impact on men and women. Men seem to think, hey, it's cool if she's watching porn. But women, can you contemplate a circumstance where you would be okay with your spouse or your partner watching porn? And I only say partner, say you're engaged, right? And maybe you haven't even had sex with the person yet, or, so your spouse or partner, right? Somebody that maybe you're just dating the person, you haven't gone there. Would you be okay? Is there a circumstance that you can contemplate? And this is just opinion that you can contemplate where you would be okay.
This is just my take on it in relationships and marriage. When you're married, you're two people coming together with flaws and everything. And though this is a topic that need to be discussed, that's up to them to make that decision. I know what I will do and what I do, but whatever you do, even though I said earlier about oral sex and anal sex and all that stuff, but if that's something that they want to do for their marriage, let it be. So what am I saying? I'm like, it's really what works for you in that particular marriage. And that's just my take on it.
So
I'd add
because
to
I'm a
Robert. Oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Helen
No,
and Raven
go ahead.
at the same time. So which one of you wants to go first? Helen, go ahead, and then Raven will have you.
Sure. I agree with Robert that, whatever works for your marriage, but I think in my mind, I feel like it goes back to what does porn do to an individual person, and then what does that person project in terms of expectation to their partner or willingness to give, adapt, connect, and all of these parts that are really supposed to be two in one. And I don't see a place where, at least for me, right? I don't know for other people, but for me, I don't see a place where it would be healthy for how I engage someone, right? Like, I don't know that I would feel comfortable with my partner watching another woman, being acted on or acting on or any of that, because that's not something that I personally do, or it's not something where I personally feel like, what is it? I'm always thinking like, what is it doing to your brain, right? What is it doing to you? What kind of fantasies are you thinking about? So I think it also would make you insecure if you know that your partner, for some, maybe not for others, it may make you feel insecure. It may have like, you may look at certain actions and reactions and think like, okay, what is he thinking? And so I don't know that I could see a situation where I'd be comfortable with it. But again, everybody's different. Everybody's kind of like expectations are different. So it works for someone, sure. You said what scenario that could I see it? I don't think that I could see one where I feel like it's a great thing. So whether I'm married or just in a partnership.
Yeah.
Right.
Raven.
So I'll be honest, it's I am, because of just the kind of person that I am, I plan on making my own porn videos. Just for me and my husband myself.
Okay, now that's different. Maybe that's the expectation.
No, because I
might have a pole in the room and everything.
Right, exactly.
But I will say, whatever the brain watches, it thinks is real.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, as a Christian, everything is going to come from that point. Even as an atheist, when I was an atheist, I can be honest enough to say that, yes, as a woman, I compare myself, I wish I was this. You kind of start defining how I need to be to please him. And then it's also creating expectations in him of how I should be. Right. Because I promise you that, I doubt he would want to be seeing a man that has a larger size than him. Like, baby, why don't you got something like his? I will say this, as a Christian, Romans 1 already tells us we watch those things. That's really bad. the human brain cannot see something and don't see it as real. The
Yep.
human brain not only sees it as real, it actually even sees it that you're committing it.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a part of us who feel that I'm in this act, not even with my husband, with the actors. So the human brain was not meant to see anything other than reality, right? So that would be one reason, even if I stepped out of Christianity and I was just kind of doing my worldly thing when I was out in the world, living real, whoever I was, with the understanding that I have now, I probably not, just because I want to have my own. So I would just make my own, which as a Christian, I probably still do anyway. And unless God convicts me, I shouldn't. Because I have to admit, no lie, I've been shaped too much by my past, by sex, by porn. That is a driving desire in me that I'm still working out with God so I can make sure it's healthy. But that's just honesty. I think when people really sit back and say, what would I do in my relationship? You have to ask yourself, what has it done so far to you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you take Christianity out of it, just look at the outcome. How do you like the outcome? Right? We could try to sugarcoat it all day long, but how has it worked for us? And if it's done fine, that's fine. But within Christianity, there's no way I can even see that that's going to be possible. So, but that's pretty much my answer.
Question in the chat, and then we're going to get to the last question for today because we're for the recording. Question from D, are the rules different because you're married? If a couple loves porn or oral sex, is it still a stigma or viewed differently versus someone who is single? That would definitely be a question for like an opinion. Are the rules different because you're married? I think, and I don't know who wants to take that. I will jump in. I do think that kind of the gist from the general discussion today, or what I've heard, is that the impact is still the same on the brain, whether you are married or not. If you are married, the impact on the brain is going to be the same if you engage in porn. And oral sex, I mean, again, if you're a married couple, the Bible says marriage bed is undefiled, right? And if you are not a Christian, I mean, hey, if you guys agree with it, as long as there's no force or whatever, if you're into BDMS, that kind of thing, hey, if you're a married couple and you both agree to do BDMS things, it's between the two of you. You guys are in a covenant. But for a single person, I think regardless, you have to think about the impact. Like she said, do you want to deal with those consequences of the potential impact on your relationship once you become married if you are single? That's my thought on that. Last question, unless somebody else wants to react to Deandra's comment, I'll get to the last question for.
I just believe that the sole purpose of this conversation, especially when we talked last night, Yada, is that it just needs to be talked about. Some people are suffering in silence. So it's just important that both people are 100% honest about what you like, what you don't like, so that because this could be about any other topic in marriage, because that's really what this is about as well. But it has to be talked about. I think that's the key. So if that's what you like and that's what he like, hey, but I think it just needs to be talked about, honestly.
Okay, two more questions. One, I'm going to ask really quickly. If I find out that my partner, the person I'm engaged to, want to get married to, has been watching porn, is engaged in porn, what should I do?
Talk about it.
Because one of my notes that I put here, we don't know why people watch porn, how it was introduced to you. Also, porn or masturbation could be a coping mechanism as well. So I just think it needs to be talked about and honestly between each other, because obviously you love this person and there's going to be something down the road you got to overcome. I'm just hoping that we can use everything that the evil one has placed in this earth realm to show him that we can overcome. But it has to be talked about. And that could be a case by case.
Yeah. And I agree with Rob, because I think the problem that we see is that it goes back again to selfish mode. Like if you really feel that this person is called, that you're called to marry this person, then iron sharpens iron, right? There's weaknesses. There's a reason why I was watching porn the whole time. And I wasn't watching the good, lovely porn. I was watching the abusive porn because I felt comfortable in that realm. that's a whole nother mental health issue going on right there, just for me, right? So for me, that, like he's saying, these are just symptoms of bigger issues, not just addictions. There's a reason why we chose to even become addicted. There are things that has hurt us, and we've are so painful about it. So I think having the conversation and seeing where a person coming from, and seeing if they want to make changes. If they don't want to make changes, then that may be another issue, because then you're gonna have to really just be honest with yourself for what you're about to walk into. My girlfriend walked into a marriage like that, and in the end, they're getting divorced right now, mainly because that's all it was, like bam, bam, bam. That's it. Bam, slap you over, move you around. And it was like, yeah, because he wasn't trying to let that go. And she thought she could deal with it. And clearly they're divorcing today.
Yeah. And I just want to encourage people, if to find out more about the impact that this has on marriage, please refer to that episode. Can we talk about the pandemic on the Lisa TerKeurst channel? And I can share the link when I post this video. I'll share the link to that video and just go through the comments. There were 299 comments, and the number of people who had talked about how they broke off their engagement or how they ended up getting divorced because of porn. It was staggering. It was staggering. So please refer to that if you have any questions about that. Last question for the show, and I just want to thank everybody once again for sharing and people for participating. Back to celibacy, y'all, because that was the first word in the title of today's episode. There, I want to read the quote from Selwyn Hughes. It's an analysis of the place that sex has in Christian living. Now, I want to emphasize this is Christian living, okay? Here's what he says, and I want some reactions to this. Surrender of the sex drive, and I'm reading this from Derek Prince's book, God is a Matchmaker, on page 155. Surrender of the sex drive to God breaks its tyranny and its power. Alexis Carroll says that the people who do the greatest work in the world are strongly sexed people who subordinate sex to the ends for which they live. In marriage, the sex drive must be channeled into procreation. If the couple wants children, they have to channel that energy into procreation, and the giving of pleasure to one's partner. Outside of marriage, the sex drive must be sublimated and channeled into creativity in the kingdom of God. Remember, the strongly sexed can strongly serve. And so I want to get some reactions. And the whole celibacy in the piece is like, I think after having a conversation like this, that's very thought-provoking. The question is, all right, how can I do this? If I want to go this path, for whatever reason I want to do it, how can I do this? What decisions do I have to make on a daily basis so that I can abstain, be celibate, or whatever? Because trying to go somewhere. I got something to do. It could be I'm trying to save money to buy. It could be whatever the goal is. But how can I do it? How can I get to the place where I'm actually celibate or abstaining? And what are some of the things I need to do to stay?
You have to know your triggers. I think when you was giving the example about your relative who was celebrating 18 months, you just got to know what triggers you. So it'd be triggers and also accountability mechanisms. They could be either mechanisms that you create on your phone, like blocking things, or it could be having someone you can talk to. Like Raven said a second ago about iron sharpening iron, that could be both in marriage and also in relationship or partnerships.
Yeah, I mean, just adding to that, it's like the small things, right? It's not always the big things. It's like the small things that lead to other small things that lead to a little bit larger, that give you, take you down a rabbit hole, right? Maybe you hear a certain song that stimulates something, maybe you watch a certain video or watch a certain film. So I think it's really like guarding yourself from things that first I think you do need to know your triggers, right? And really understand yourself and like understand how you respond to things. And then it's like, how do I now create guards against these things? And then I think having the accountability, whether it's with your friends, small groups, church, or also like, what do you want out of this, right? Sometimes I think, is it just to be celibate to be celibate? Is it celibate for commitment to God? Is it celibate for marriage? Is it celibate for health? Like, what do you want out of this? And then I think the other part of it is like just being open. I think sometimes a lot of people don't have people to talk to, you know? I remember actually when we used to do small groups, right? Me and Joan. I remember a young lady came to me and said, our church doesn't really talk about sex. And so she wanted to have this conversation with me, and we had a really long conversation, and it led her towards being celibate. Um, but first she had to have that conversation with someone who was going to talk to her from this place of like non-condemnation, no shame, like say what it is, right? And understand that we're human and that we all fall. So I think a lot of people don't have that starting off. They don't have friends or community members or church members or anybody that they can go to. And I think that helps down that journey in general.
Mhm. Any other
Miss
reaction?
Joan, we haven't heard from you.
How can I stay celibate? Well, I'm actually trying to ask the question in case that somebody else wants to respond to that. How can I stay celibate, or how can I get there? And what are some of the things that I need to do? So just putting the question out there.
I didn't have anything new to add. I would agree with Robert about knowing your triggers. That, knowing I can't sit here and listen to Luther and not start to go down a particular path, or knowing what you grew up. A chair isn't a chair. No, so the whole repertoire. I was like, oh, So, but then also knowing things just from your past. For me, I come from a Christian perspective too. Of what have you been delivered from? Do you want to go back to that? So I'm like, I prefer. I was set free to be free. So okay, what's going to keep me from getting snared in something I don't want to be snared in? And what are the things? So for me, it was definitely, avoiding triggers. Okay, don't do that. You know what frame of mind you're in right now. Don't listen to that. Now, today, I think I could listen to Luther and I'm not there. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. I'll put it in the box, but you just got to know. And don't fool yourself. Just don't go there.
Yeah, I might be able to listen to Luther one time, but if I keep throwing down on it.
There's reasons for it. There's reasons. I think for me, because mine is attached to sexual abuse. So I've learned that with sexual abuse, your limbic system stronger, your frontal lobe decreases, right? And God just convicted me like, you ain't doing porn in your marriage. I understand. Because it's like what happens is your fears actually get higher, your sexual desires get higher. So a lot of times it's being really honest with what has happened in your past. Mm-hmm. Right? And the things that has happened in your past, what are now like little bits throughout life has started to feed that, right? And so as much as I may not have had sex anymore, right? That's one of the reasons why I wanted to go to a sex addiction clinic, because in my head, I still see all the sexual images. In my head, I still see myself as the porn. And so for me, I think is not only knowing your triggers, but knowing where they came from. Don't trivialize it. Don't over spiritualize and say, well, I gave it to Jesus, right? Literally say, have I overcome? Has God helped me with this? Have I gone to counseling to deal with these things? Because addictions don't come out of nowhere, right? And like even when you say you try something once, then it can go out of whack. But a lot of times it really is like it has become a coping mechanism to help you kind of just exist and function, and you almost don't see it as wrong. And I think one of the key things is taking the time to probably go to counseling to deal with these things, because I even see in my own self, reason why I'm still single is because I still got to deal with what a lot of sexual abuse have done to me in the past. And the small things I've fed throughout the years, even though I was a Christian, I didn't allow God into this area until just recently. Which is probably why I still want to do certain things in my marriage, because it makes me feel comfortable. But even God just convicted me like, babe, I'm sorry, between me and you, that ain't gonna happen. And I understand it. So I think it's imperative people go through counseling as well. Not only, to stay sustained, I think God is is huge, and prayer and devoting yourself to reading his word and seeking people who are doing the work, but also going through counseling as well and actually talking about some things and overcoming some things. And just putting it out there and being honest and not letting shame keep you trapped into something that you really don't want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to, we're getting ready to close now, and this was so good. This was just rich. I want to thank everybody for their honesty and the truth of what your experiences have been. I want Raven to post the Wildwood Lifestyle Center, to post that link to the Wildwood Lifestyle Center for anybody who wants to just understand that Wildwood is a resource for addictions and for natural diseases as well, like diabetes, like, kind of nutritional related, not necessarily nutritionally related diseases. I think of diabetes and high blood pressure as that, but it could be genetic. But Wildwood is an excellent resource. I've referred people there all the time. I've been to Wildwood myself, just for different things. And so it's a great place. So if we could just post that in the chat. But also just remembering that you're not alone in this conversation and the journey with celibacy or trying to break free from addiction or healing from a porn addiction or healing from a relationship or a marriage where this was there. So this has only helped me understand there is a need for more conversations like this one. This is a conversation series, you guys. We are going to do a conversation on divorce and remarriage. That's going to be another episode. But I want to thank everybody now who joined us.